Hi, Arizona lawyer Julie LaBenz here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I want to talk to you about how to move forward with your divorce if you and your spouse co-own a house. A lot of legal issues can come up when the marital house needs to be either bought out by one side, sold. Another common issue is who's going to be able to continue to reside in the house while the divorce is pending. So let's break those down and talk about each individual issue. So first we've got the issue of possession. Possession and ownership are two distinct issues. You're still a co-owner, but you could lose possession if you move out of the house and your spouse stays in the house. In other words, once you move out, it's really hard to get back in. So be clear that you're ready to go and that you don't want to return if you decide to move out. Because like I said, it can be really hard to regain possession. It's definitely not impossible, but it creates a lot of challenges, and you may have to get court authority, and that could require going to a contested hearing. So word to the wise, before you move out, make sure you are ready to move out. You have a place to go, and you're not going to want to return to the house unless you and your spouse make an agreement to that effect. Okay, so that's the possession issue. Who's going to live there while the divorce is pending? Second, once you figure out who's going to live there, then there may be some issues of, well, what about the expenses related to the house? Who's responsible, for example, to pay the mortgage? What if any repairs or maintenance come up? Well, as far as the mortgage goes, generally the person who maintains possession, they would be responsible for the mortgage. There can be a balancing out of the living expenses of the two spouses. So for example, if one spouse moved out and they now have an apartment and they're paying $1,000 a month for their apartment, and then the other spouse stays in the house and the mortgage payment is $2,000 a month. Well, what could happen in that instance is the spouse that lives in the apartment that's paying $1,000 could be ordered to contribute, or could agree to contribute, $500 per month towards the spouse that's remaining in the house. That way they each have an equal housing payment of $1,500 per month. So that's one way to do it. Additionally, if your spouse won't agree to equalize out the housing expenses, you can go and ask the judge to do so. Depending on your circumstances, you may or may not have a compelling case in that regard. But the divorce court is a court of equity, so it is very common that the court would order spouses to equalize out their living expenses while the divorce is pending. Okay, so we've talked about possession, we've talked about expenses. A little bit more on expenses. We talked about just in general, mortgage versus rent if one spouse moves out. But what about other expenses related to the house? Repairs, upkeep, things of that nature. Again, there could be a requirement that the spouse that is out of possession contribute to those expenses. Usually it's a 50-50 division. Usually the spouses first have to agree to do any maintenance or repairs and agree to split those 50-50, so there should be some communication about what's going on. That can certainly make it easier than having to go to court and ask the judge to have to decide, oh, was this repair needed? How much should it have cost? Who should contribute what? That could be very detailed and complicated. So instead, opening that dialogue with your spouse, getting on the same page if possible about repairs and maintenance can be extremely helpful and smooth things out while you're going through the divorce. Let's now move into what to do with the house. Number one, you could sell, or number two, one spouse can buy the other out. So, putting up for sale, not too complicated. You'll need to agree to a real estate agent. You'll need to agree to a list price, and you'll also need to agree about how to accept an offer. In other words, if an offer comes in, it's lower than your list price, what are you going to do? Usually you'll look at, well, how much lower? If it's within 1%, 2%, 3%, you can decide the percentage. You can do some calculations. There could be an agreement that, look, we will accept any offer that's within 5% of the list price. Additionally, there can be an agreement about how long to leave the house listed before reducing the price if it doesn't sell. So there can also be an agreement, for example, okay, look, if we have the house listed for 60 days at $500,000 and it doesn't sell, then we're going to reduce it by $5,000. I'm just making up terms, but you get the point. it really helps if you can, before you take a certain action, for example, listing the house, if you and your spouse can get on the same page and iron out these details. Who's going to be your agent? What's going to be the list price? What are you going to do if the house doesn't sell? What's going to be the process if you've got to lower the price? Also, what's going to be the process to accept an offer? And what are the ranges that you'd be willing to accept an offer within? So those are some details related to selling a house. And then there's the other option, which is having one spouse buy out the other. Now, caution, please. Do not just say, okay, you can have the house and I'll get other property to equalize out my interest in the house. If you are a co-borrower with your spouse, if you are on that mortgage, then you need to insist that your spouse get a refinance, because the last thing you want to do is be stuck as a co-borrower on a house you no longer own, and then that mortgage is on your credit and you could have trouble qualifying for a new mortgage. Additionally, if your spouse who got the house, your ex-spouse down the road, ends up getting foreclosed on, that could affect your credit too. So you really don't want to maintain any ongoing ties with your spouse upon divorce. In particular, you don't want to continue to be a co-borrower on a mortgage. So what I suggest is the one spouse that's going to keep the house, they need to get a refinance. They need to go talk to their loan officer, apply, make sure that they qualify, and then in that refinance, they can, depending on the situation, pull out equity from the house and then use that to pay off the spouse that is not getting the house. In other words, just pay off that spouse for their interest in the house. So those are some issues related to co-ownership of a marital house and what to do during divorce. This is not all the issues, but as far as possession during the divorce, expenses of the house, the mortgage, the upkeep, repairs, what to do with that, and then also selling versus a refinance, a buyout, and some things to think about with that. So thank you so much for listening. I'm Arizona lawyer Julie LaBenz. You can find me at julielabenz.com. Check out more of my YouTube videos. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate all of my viewers, and I wish you success with your divorce. Thank you.